Welcome to Winchcombe! Winchcombe was absolutely beautiful and such an amazing adventure for us. I'm just a little smartly. I'm not recording in Winchcombe sadly, so just doing my normal day job. Let's get straight into it. Since I'm not there right now, let's get straight into what it is you can do when you're in Winchcombe. The main reason people are going to want to go and visit Winchcombe is because of Sudeley Castle and the castle gardens. Now, it is an absolutely beautiful castle that is still in use. It's still an active castle. It still hosts guests, so sometimes it's closed to the public, especially, you can't have like royal procedure when the public are just generally walking around. So make sure before you go that the castle will be open and you'll be able to explore it and explore the garden. There's obviously a lot of history about the castle that you'll be able to find out there. View the beautiful architecture that is the castle, and you'll have a fantastic time just like experiencing traditional English castles, I guess. And it's also surrounded by gorgeous gardens. We were blown away by just how immaculate they were, but we shouldn't really be, considering this is a royal castle, so it's expected to be looking beautiful. But the garden grounds, you can walk around as well and see lots of beautiful flowers decorated in beautiful ways, as well as more beautiful buildings that are around, and also just look out onto the views of the gorgeous countryside surrounding Winchcombe. Now, Sudeley Castle itself is massive, so it's going to take you quite a few hours to look around. So that is the main attraction. The main attraction is the castle, and I highly recommend it. It was definitely worth the visit to Winchcombe just to see Sudeley Castle, and it is incredible. So highly recommend going just for that. Now, walking around Winchcombe itself is a nice town. It's a very pretty town, but there isn't exactly an overload to do there. You can just generally walk around the town and see some interesting architecture. That's always nice and that's always cool, but it's not as interesting as architecture around other places like Bourton-on-the-Water, Castle Combe. These sort of cottages have much more interesting architecture, but still some of the buildings around Winchcombe are still very nice, and you can still get to see a classic style of British architecture. We thought that there was going to be a more interesting street with Vineyard Street, but unfortunately it was a little small and not actually that interesting, so we was looking forward a little bit too much for that, thinking maybe it's like to some of the other famous places around the Cotswolds, but not much really to see there, and there were loads of trees around, stopping sort of any sort of sunlight coming in, if you wanted to take photos around the area, around Vineyard Street anyway. But there do seem to be some other streets there that are kind of like locked off or gated off that you can't really get into. That would be much better to look at the building's architecture. However, St. Peter's Church is incredible. It's a very big church. It's gorgeous on the outside. The inside is equally gorgeous. Unfortunately, we didn't really have time to film inside, because when we got there, we got locked in for about a minute, where it was like, oh my God, did they lock the door? And then the man who was locking up opened it for us, not realizing, because he had already done his check-in around, and then we must have got in after he had checked the area and assumed it was all closed. But it did look gorgeous on the inside, and it's gorgeous on the outside, and it's free entry, so you can just go there and just check out the architecture, check out sort of the building inside the church, and if you want to make any sort of prayer or anything like that, you can, for free, and you can just admire the building itself, which is definitely worth visiting if you are in the area anyway. Now, I would say that Winchcombe is worth visiting just for Sudeley Castle, and if Sudeley Castle wasn't there, there wouldn't really be too many reasons to go there. And maybe a lot of people are thinking, the castle, great, but not really much to do in town. The town is definitely worth exploring. But also what makes Winchcombe so amazing is Cleeve Hill as well, which is about a 15-minute drive from the main town, sort of like driving upwards into the hills, it's not really a mountainous area, but I guess maybe small mountains or big hills. And you drive here for the views at sunset, which we saw were immaculate. And if you're traveling around the Cotswolds during the summertime where the sun sets kind of late, you'll have a long time to explore the castle, do a little bit of exploring in the town and the church, and go into Cleeve Hill, doing a bit of a hike. If you can hike up there as well, it's probably not too long of a hike, but we did drive, and just check out the sunset, have a hike, have a bike ride up there. The views are amazing. Definitely some of the best views we've seen, and just the height we were in, walking around, doing a small hike, and just looking out at the openness, the grandness that is the beautiful countryside in the Cotswolds. Now again, if you want to eat locally sourced food to try and get a taste of the Cotswolds, there are some places like the Corner Cupboard, which is apparently a locally sourced bar where you can get stuff, but every time we're in the Cotswolds, we're just like, you know what, eating here is just a little bit too expensive. So usually we try and eat somewhere like a local supermarket or get some snacks from a petrol station, for example. Not exactly eating local, but it is quite costly, and if you are managing your budget, you will need to probably do this as well. However, there will be some bars around that do have locally sourced food. However, this time we did eat in the castle. I got a classic fish and chips, which was absolutely amazing. The castle food quality was, I would say, very high. It was very delicious. Felicity got a breakfast bap, fried egg, hash browns, and bacon. A classic British meal where you just can't go wrong, especially if you're eating in a very luxurious place like a castle. And whilst we're eating in a castle, eating like a king and queen, why not have a scone or a scone to go with it with cream and jam? Now, obviously it is called a scone, and it does go sort of like cream butter on first with the jam on top of that. That is obviously the most traditional way to eat it here in the UK. And I think the whole country would agree with me. Now, getting here is going to be driving. Now, it does take about 2 hours from London to the Cotswolds, and then when you're in the Cotswolds, it can be a little bit around. It took us about 30 minutes from where we were staying. We were staying in Bourton-on-the-Water as sort of our home base, and we were sort of like traveling out to all the places. It was about a 30-minute drive from Bourton-on-the-Water to Winchcombe, and it is a very hilly place, and some of the roads are very small. So as you're driving up some very steep roads, and then you got to kind of like drive out into them, I would say if you're not the most confident driver, this is not going to be a place you're going to like driving around. Now, to get here, you can also get buses from Cheltenham as well. However, we didn't do this because we're driving, but it's another option. And the other third option would be to take a train here. Now, I do want to kind of do a journey around the Cotswolds where we see about traveling around on buses and trains and not just driving. But obviously for more convenience and the lack of time that we generally have to explore places, it's so much easier for me just to drive everywhere. However, I do believe that like you can do the Cotswolds via traveling on buses and trains. And Winchcombe it's a very major stop for the train journey. Now, I believe when I was researching it that it was going to be more of like a steam train. However, when we got there thinking it was going to be a steam train, it wasn't. And maybe that's because I got my times wrong. But the train did seem sort of more traditional style on the inside. Anyway, we went to the train station just to see the train. Not that we're train spotters, but you know, it's always cool to see historical style trains. Maybe steam trains just don't run through the area, climate change and all of that, that's happening. Maybe it's not the best option. I thought my research told me it was, but maybe that's just incorrect. But either way, even if there's no steam trains, then you can still get trains going around. And Winchcombe train station is just your normal train station, but it does have a very big sign saying Winchcombe. However, if there are more like locomotive style trains, maybe worth checking those out and taking a ride on one if they're still around. Winchcombe is going to take a whole day, unlike Stow-on-the-Wold, which you can do in half a day. And there are other places in the Cotswolds that also would only take like half a day, like Castle Combe. Winchcombe is an entire day. You've got to visit Sudeley Castle, and that's going to be a half a day anyway. So Winchcombe is an entire day event. Walking around town and visiting the church doesn't take too long, only a couple of hours, but then going up to Cleeve Hill as well. And if you do all those things, you're going to have a fantastic experience here and really get to see some beautiful sights and experience the Cotswolds and English culture to its fullest. Then you can definitely get a great experience and local experience here. But before we go, hey, check out our Insta showreel for Winchcombe. But I've probably already spoken too much about Winchcombe. If you're planning your trip there, have a fantastic time. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. But for now, as we say in the UK, see you later, mate.